It's 8 o'clock. Welcome to Tribe TV. So good to have you with us. Please start a watch party or share the link and draw people into this. We are talking about certain leadership for uncertain times. We really need to be sure-footed, don't we, in this unusual season. Some of us are beginning to creep into in-person services. We're trying to work our way around the pandemic, and we really need to be stable and leading well in this time, because it's an unusual time for everybody. So leaders, we do have to step up and provide stable leadership. And so all this week we've opened up some of our vault full of leadership material, and we're just giving 5 nights of looking at some chapters and some Q&As and some books and some of the courses that we have on leadership, just to provide some leadership lessons. And today we're going to be really specific about the pandemic, and I'm going to talk about how we can lead prophetically in this time. There's a question that was asked from one of the leaders within the leadership tribe, and that's what we do a lot. When you join the leadership tribe, there's Q&A, there's back and forth, we're wrestling with issues, and we're learning to do leadership really well together in this online learning community. At the very end of this program, I will share with you how 10 of your leaders can join together, and it is a fantastic way to join, to learn together, to be growing in God together as a stable, strong leadership team, able to provide something that's going to endure to the people in your church around about you. So stick around if that interests you, and I'd love to have you as part of our family around the world, learning and growing together. But I got this question about how to lead prophetically, and so I'm gonna play you my answer to that, really, about how to hear God, how to be self-aware of what can go wrong when we're trying to negotiate how we hear God for the people around about us and the fellowships that we lead. But then also a little bit about communication, a little bit about pace, so that we can provide people with a sense of mature, stable leadership going forward. So have a little look at this, and then think about coming and joining our tribe and be part of a family that's wrestling through these issues together. Have a little look at this. Hey there, we got a great question to look at. Listen to this. As a prophetic leader, how do you discern between the stuff God is showing you for now and what's for later, especially in seasons like this when it's all coming thick and fast? And then it kind of follow-on question, and how do you then practically take what he shows you and communicate it or minister it to the people who aren't so prophetic in the congregation? So it's about prophetic leadership, prophetic guidance, and I guess it's about pace. So wow, it is a really good one, isn't it? Because we can have quite an idealistic view of leadership when we start. I did 30 years ago, and you kind of think, well, I'll just hear God and do what he says, and because God's saying it, everybody will like it. You soon find that that's not going to happen, right? It's more complex than that. So let me just take you through a few layers of this. I'm going to talk about self-knowledge. I'm going to talk about the knowledge of those around about you. Then I'm going to talk about communication skills. Firstly, self-knowledge. When we are beginning to lead, knowing yourself and your frailties are really important. For instance, I'm an ideas person. I can have 10 ideas before breakfast, and in fact I usually do. I absolutely love ideas. I love free thinking, and in the early years I thought I had to action every idea. Now I've realized over time, thankfully fairly quickly, that was a real weakness in my personality, because I thought if I had an idea, it must be prophetic, it must be God, we should just get on and do it, right? And of course I was exhausting myself and everybody around about me, and we were doing nothing well because we were doing too much. Because I realized a weakness in my personality type that is really good for thinking of the 10 ways we might fix something is also really weak, that I think we've got to do every idea that comes my way. So learning the weakness in my strength, which is that I have a lot of ideas, and they're not all prophetic and they're not all from God. So I now have this vein in me that I listen to all of my ideas, but I ignore most of them. You know, one of the important things to learn over time is what ideas are coming to you that are prophetic and useful, and you get better at discerning a good idea from a bad idea. If one sticks with me for a while, I'll then bring it to the team. I'll let the team pull it apart. Sometimes I'll even introduce my idea by saying, can you tell me the 10 reasons why this is not a good idea? See, I'm giving them permission not to just say, oh, yes, Jarrod, you're wonderful, but rather, well, what about this? Because every idea has a downside. If you haven't found it, you're not thinking about ideas properly. So know yourself first. If you were a real ideas person, if you're a real prophetic person, and one of the great areas in the prophetic is that we get something from God, but then we kind of read the context into it and the meaning into it that we want, okay? Rather than, so what has God actually said? And sometimes we can run ahead with a prophetic word from over here thinking that it's a solution to a problem over here. And our joining of the prophetic and reality is a little bit immature. So again, we need to really develop the clarity and the quality of our prophetic gift. Because there's a reason why apostles and prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists all work together. Is because the prophets see things. I mean, go read the book of Daniel, Ezekiel, Revelation. They're just weird, right? It takes the apostles to interpret that into clear strategy. It takes the teachers to give it a theology. It takes the pastors to give it a community. This is getting quite good, isn't it? And it takes the evangelists to give it a purpose that reaches the world, which is always God's ultimate purpose, to go help people and reach people. So if you have an immature prophetic gift, you're going to run headlong. Remember, direction is not pace. They're two very different things. And so you've got to discern between, okay, God's saying going in this direction, but he's not saying to do it in the next 2 weeks. When God speaks to me, I used to get excited, and I thought that excitement was urgency from heaven. But it wasn't. It was just excitement that I was actually hearing from God. So I'm there trying to outwork things in 2 weeks. And God's actually spoken, and in his mind he's saying, no, it's going to take you about 5 years. He does everything slower than I think. And then when something really does happen with a great urgency and speed, I usually find that God takes over and does it. There's only a few times in my life where he has instructed me with urgency and I've moved with urgency and it's been the right thing to do. A lot of the time God's moving slower. So just be careful with a tendency towards urgency, because we want to get stuff done, right? We want to get on with life. Beware of striving in your personality. Beware of a desire to be successful. That's really tough these days when we are bombarded with, shiny images of what church should look like. We want to get on and do the right stuff. Take your time. Walk in the cool of the day with Jesus and learn his pace, not just his purpose. Pace is much harder than purpose. Quite easy to see what direction to head in. To get the pace right in such a way that it takes all the right people with you, knowing all along that you're never going to take everyone with you. That's a really hard one for leaders. So learning that pace, that it's fast enough to be obedient, but slow enough to take as many with you as you can, but also then not just moving at the pace of the slowest. Otherwise the church grinds to a halt because some are completely stuck. That's just the reality of church life everywhere, okay? So know yourself. If you've got a bit of a tendency to rush, you've got to interpret these things, okay? And then develop a track record of hearing, listening, developing, and doing. And learn that cycle fully, because many will jump from revelation to revelation, never fully implementing what they need to do. So you often find that people that just lead prophetically can end up in a bit of a land of chaos, because things aren't done consistently. They're using the prophetic gift when actually there's lots of it to fix everything, when actually there's lots of other gifts that need to come into play to help. So houses that are mainly prophetic can be quite chaotic. You need to engage other gifts within yourself and within your team and within your church body so that it lands for everybody and things are fully done and fully implemented and thoroughly finished properly. A lot of things don't fail because the idea was bad. They fail because it was never implemented properly and fully. If you don't work the idea won't work. And that goes with instructions from heaven too. If you don't work what God is saying won't work. You need to just really develop a track record of we hear God, we implement, we test, we evaluate, we improve, we hear God again, and so it becomes a thorough thing, rather than some prophetic houses can end up going, we're going this way, then we're going that way, then God said here, and it literally is, it's the children of Israel in the wilderness, and if that's the season that you're in, then that's fine. But really, if you're gonna, I will build my church as a season, then we need to begin to think a little bit more like architects. We need the dream, but then we also need the plans, and we put it all together and we work with God. Okay, so there's a whole round set of skills that needs to come together. So that's self-knowledge. Know where you're at. Don't rush. When I first took Revive on 15 years ago, I thought I'd have it sorted out in 3 years. Well, I'm 15 years later, I'm still in. Took me the first 7 just to really grasp what the vision was. Yeah, I'm a bit slow. So it took me quite a while to work through what was in the church already, and that can be a bit of a Saul's armor, and you've got the pressure of all the things that are happening now. Then slowly you're going, so what could be? And of course, I think I'll get that sorted in a year. Took me about 7 years to really get my feet under the table, get a feel of where we were going as a family, get a feel of the voice of God, and learn to embed things at a pace that we could manage. And I still get it wrong today. It's gloriously imperfect. So never put on yourself the burden of perfect leadership that always gets it 100% right and never loses anyone. There is not a church around. Jesus got it 100% right, but he still lost people. So there's not a church around that can just retain everything as it was, never rattle the cage, never turn over the tables in the temple, and never lose a disciple. It's just not real life. But self-knowledge will help. The second one is team knowledge. If you want to lead prophetically, you want to develop a church culture and a leadership team culture that's accepting of the prophetic, because it is the harder of the gifts, because it is more intuitive. We feel we should be going this way, led by the Holy Spirit. People generally prefer teacher-led churches because everything's nice and principled, easy to understand. It's a PowerPoint on a board and we're just following that through. Prophetic culture is a bit wilder than that, and that's specifically what the question is about. So I want to talk about that, and that's the culture we lead. But I understand. My church would be bigger if I was a teacher. I know that. I'm never gonna get the church to be as big as some of my teacher friends, because it's a wilder leadership style. It's harder to follow. It's led by dreams and visions and pictures, and we sense this. And as much as I do, I ground it with the other gifts, but it's a harder thing. So that's why it's taken me 15 years to develop a prophetic culture where I've got a team and a congregation that are accepting of prophetic leadership and understand, okay, now we know this isn't a teacher leading us like a prophet. So I've taught people how prophets think. I've taught them how to be led prophetically and to be accepting of their prophetic leadership, and how we embed that with all the other gifts. But it's a culture that you develop, and it's a culture that is based around things like being flexible. Intimacy with God and his voice is a high value to us, so you've got to be flexible. We're going to move with God whenever he speaks. The other thing with team knowledge is beware of pace. Know where your team and your people are at. I look at mine, and now if I get something with genuine urgency from heaven, which only happens every now and then, I know, okay, I've got to find a way to do this. But a lot of the time I look at them and I go, ooh, maybe not now. I'm looking at this part of the church. They're a bit weary. They're not ready for me to breathe something else. So, let's just sit down at a well for a bit, have a long drink and a rest. And then when I can see they're recouping, then I go, hey, there's this new direction. But sometimes I can wait a good few months, maybe even take 3 years over something that I realize they're not quite flexible enough and they're a bit weary. And so we need to do some work at a cultural level before we can be accepting of the seed of God's word. Remember, the heart soil has to be ready for the seed. Otherwise, it's just not accepted. So we're working on hearts and soil ready to hear the word of God and move forward. So sometimes you have to go, okay, I'm going to park this word. I'm not even going to mention it. And I'm going to work on the soil issues of the heart of this group or this particular leadership team or even an entire congregation. I'm going to get the soil right so that when I bring this, and if it really is a word from God, it'll keep coming to me like the waves on the sea, just gently, not manipulating or rushing me. God is often just gently guiding you in a certain direction. And then a good leader will go, right, I'm going to get the soil ready to be accepting of the seed of that word. If you just scatter seed everywhere on the hard paths, nothing's going to take anyway. So sometimes you have to do a lot of soil preparation in the team or in the entire church, ready for where God wants to lead you. So backtrack from the word you've got and then say, so what culture would be accepting of that word? That's the leadership job. The prophetic gets the pure word. The leadership job says, okay, now I'm going to create a culture that will accept that word. And then I'm going to deliver that word and we're going to move forward together. Have balance. It's another part of pace. Have balance. Don't just weary people with rushing into prophetic things. But also think of this. If you're coming with a big, major prophetic word of change and additions to your leadership team or your church or your project team, think of life like a seesaw. You can't just keep adding things. And lots of churches make this mistake. They just keep adding things. Oh, God has said, and we run with the prophetic gift into the things that he's saying without stopping to think, okay, what do we need to lighten? If I'm going to add more weight on this side so that we don't just end up off balance, what are we going to stop doing to give us time to do? Smaller churches tend to get very exhausted doing everything, often because smaller churches are so relational, they can be not very good at having honest conversations about, this isn't working, shall we stop it? And let's move over here and do this. Think about balance so you don't become exhausted and weary as a church. Here's another one. Very often we're using the prophetic way too much to lead when the other gifts have to be engaged as well. So I've been into some cultures that are led by prophetic leaders or prophetic teams, but they're using the prophetic to do everything. And so you find things like this. They're very prophetic, very spiritual, very into prayer, but they're very passive-aggressive in their relationships. They're not having honest, good leadership conversations. So when they have a personnel problem, let's say somebody's rebellious or they're causing trouble or strife, they go to a prophetic posture, which is kind of, well, I'll pray about it. Or they'll go to a slightly cranky intercessor place which is, right, I'm getting prophetic words about how this person is this, that, or the other. When actually, all of that's really passive-aggressive. If you want to be a well-rounded leader, it doesn't matter if you're prophetic, because all of us hate tough conversations, right? So I would much rather hide in a room and pray about a difficult person than go see them. But if you're going to lead a church and not just be a prophet, you need to often go see them. Now, you might need to hear God about the when, and God help me go about this the right way. But nothing beats walking up to a person and going, what's wrong? You seem unhappy. You've become, you were fine and now you're difficult. So sometimes we can be using prophetic gifts to fix practical problems, and we end up in a bit of a passive-aggressive place that we think is spiritual, but it breeds really unhealthy cultures. So many churches led by prophetic people have been handed on to the next pastor, and they go, boy, this place is just full of relational mess because the leaders were so prophetic, they didn't lead well. So again, you just got to don't use prophetic tools all the time. Really develop the other sides of you, either within yourself or within your team. So it's a very strong team, and you've got the pragmatic thinkers and the prophetic people. You've got the how do we execute that in leadership, how do we pay for it financially, how do we, and so you get all the different parts of it together, and then what you find is the prophetic can get grounded in a really healthy culture when you pull all those together. All right, and then just a few other little skills. When I hear God, seeing as we're talking about getting prophetic wisdom for the future, these days I'll very often say to God, as it comes, I'm having a conversation. And not just a monologue from God to me prophetically, but if God introduces a thought to you prophetically, you're allowed to have a conversation. You're allowed to go, what do you mean? What will that look like? When should I do that? And if God says to me, now I want you to start this now, I'll usually come back the next day and said, I'm just making sure that wasn't pizza. Did you really mean now? And so I enter a dialogue. I use paper and pen a lot. It's how I do all my thinking. And there's only a slight difference between me pondering and journaling and me being prophetic. It's for me, it helps me focus with paper and pen, thinking about stuff. But I'm asking God questions. God, you spoke to me about this particular project. When do you want me to do that? Who should be involved with it? And so I'm pulling on the prophetic side, but the whole time I'm also pulling on leadership skills too. so that the two sides are checking each other, so that I know now, ooh, well, that's a wild thought, God, are you sure? Because the leader within me goes, that's nuts. So then I'm into the realm of testing prophecy myself. If I can't find a conclusion, I go to my team. Here's what I'm thinking, but prophetic me says this, leader me says that. What do you guys think? And sometimes they go, leader you is right. Listen, James chapter 3, verse 17, 18, wisdom from above is submissive. So I'm getting a prophetic idea. I'm still submitting it to the counsel of really trusted spiritual people that know me. They know the weaknesses of my prophetic side and the strengths of it. And they're going to go, let's sit on that for a while. Or, oh no. Or they're going to go, no, push, just ignore leader you for a minute. I've been sensing that same thing. And when you pull the wisdom together in a group, bang, you get clarity. And you're able to put it together. But what I'm trying to say is you're allowed to go back and ask God more questions about what he said. Things like timing and who and how. Go to the counsel of many, like I was just saying. Involve a good, trusted team. Now, it really helps to do some kind of those sort of self-analysis tests, like Strength Finders or Myers-Briggs, or we use Insights a lot, things like that, to understand who you've got. Because what you're going to find, you're going to have blue sky thinkers in and around your team somewhere that love. I've got a group, we just love to have 100 ideas of what's the different ways. And we salivate over ideas. We enjoy thinking of that kind of stuff. And then there's others that are process people. As soon as we say an idea, all they're thinking is, well, you couldn't afford that. You couldn't get the people. You couldn't. Now, they're not being obstructive on purpose. Okay, somebody who's poor at that is. But usually what's happening is it's the wrong person in the room for a moment of blue sky thinking. You need to let the dreams and the ideas flow and the prophecies flow before you then take them to the other part of your team that are the process thinkers that are going to go, well, you'd have to shut that down to do that. Or, practically how would you do because of this? Or you need an online that, or we haven't got the skills to do this. But the two need each other. But make sure you're using them in the right places. Whenever I tried to bring in a process person into blue sky thinking, they just shut it down before it started. Okay, so have a prophetic world, then have a process world. Get the right people in the room and your ideas will flow, and the prophetic ideas will flow, and the word of God will flow. But then go to your next team, which is more of a deacon team, I suppose you might say biblically, where you're going, okay, practically, how could we do this? And then we're willing to adjust things practically to fit the prophetic picture and vice versa. Okay, so always working in team. It's really, really powerful. So the counsel of many will help you. And you do have to discern when somebody is just being obstructive or when they're trying to be helpful. I've got some team members that I didn't used to get, but now they're so valuable to me as I realize their gift is to pick apart the detail. They love a good spreadsheet. I can't stand them. I just want a headline from heaven and to go for it. So two different teams, headline team, detail team. Get them to work properly. Some skills about how you then introduce change to some team and certainly to congregation. And my favorite method is to drip feed change. There is a right moment for a big announcement of a revolutionary change, but you use them sparingly. If you're having more than one a year, 2 a year, then you're probably being over revolutionary for most people who, a lot of people are going to be late adopters. They don't like constant change all the time. But I'll even use this with my team. I'll drip feed. See, what happens with change and the prophetic is I can often hear something, and if you're prophetic, you're hearing quite a way down the track very often. Now, what is happening to you psychologically and emotionally is from the moment you first hear or even get a whiff of, a distant dream or a glimmer of a certain change coming, a certain project, a certain new horizon for your church, you are psychologically beginning to adjust. And of course, that is helped by the empowerment of the prophetic word. It's coming out of an intimate place with God, which really helps your entire faith psyche to line up with where God's going. Now, there can be months between that first moment, sometimes even years between that first moment and when I bring it to the team. Let's say there can be 3 years. There's going to be some projects in my church that it's taken me 3 years from the first glimmer of, we should be helping people with this, to the moment when I actually sit down in a leadership team and go, we need to be doing this, it can be a long time sometimes. And I've completely adjusted to that over time. But I've got to understand, the moment I sit down and tell people that, I'm dumping a revolutionary change on them that I now think is the most obvious thing in the world, because I've been on the emotional and psychological journey. They haven't. I have to remember this is day one for them, and not only that, they're trusting my intimacy with God, not their own intimacy with God. So it's a massive thing when I dump change on a congregation. I much prefer to drip feed. What I usually do is, if I really sense something is coming back to me like the waves on the shore about a change in church life, or a certain horizon that we need to head towards, or a certain way that we need to be or behave or change our culture, I'll drip feed it very early. I'll throw it into off the cuff remarks in sermons. Wouldn't it be great if one day we could? Anyway, might never happen, but you never know. Pray about it, someone, and then I'm off on my sermon. I'll drip feed it into leadership meetings. I've been just go away and pray about it. I've just been dreaming that one day we could help certain people in such and such a way. Or wouldn't it be awesome if I take a big one, like a building change? Wouldn't it be great to just have a bigger space to do ABC, whatever? You drip feed it in so that people have almost the same emotional journey time that you have. And then some, because they have to go and hook into God with that journey. You've already done that from day one. So drip feed change early. And what you'll find is you'll take people with you. Stop coming when you've arrived at, it's the decision to make. And then getting upset when people don't sit there and they jump to your same emotional place and go, yep, absolutely, it's the right thing to do. The early adopters probably in the room will. Some people just love change. But there's going to be others that go, ooh, whoa. Give me 3 or 4 months to think about this too. So have compassion for people's journey and drip feed change. Let them take the emotional journey, because with every change, somewhere along the line, there's a grieving the loss of what you're leaving behind, and you have to give them that process as well as the process of embracing the new. So then there are other times when you do stand up and you have a revolution, but probably not too often. Then finally, when you come to announce publicly what you're doing, as was put into the question, how do we announce something in such a way that people are accepting of it? Well, include the prophetic dream of the thing, the thing that God said for the prophetic types. But you want to include the theology for the people that want to know how this thing really lines up with where you're going. You want to include the practicals, how you're going to afford it, how things are going to adjust. You want to talk about the value of where you're going. And it's also worth including why you need to step away from what's been. We don't want to be like this anymore. We've had enough of this. We realize this group aren't getting met in this certain. So you've got to give the reason why to move, the negative as well as the positive, then the theology and the practicals as well as the dream. The why is the most important thing. And then as you share it, hopefully it's touching every life in the room. As well, of course, think of what you're speaking. Think of how it looks. Draw pictures. One of the great things is to tell stories of where you want to go, of little things that have happened like it in the past and how valuable it would be if you could do more of that, or stories that you've heard from elsewhere and inspire people. So you want everything for the pragmatic, you want it for the prophetic, you want it for the practical, you want it for the financial, and then you want people to be caught up in the why. This is just imagine if. So from one little prophetic word, often alone, it has to be brought out into a whole broad world so that you take people with you. The higher the trust between the prophetic leader and the congregation, the easier this all is. The lower the trust, and that might not be, it might be just because you're new that the trust levels are slightly lower. It might be because you're untried and untested. The trust levels are lower. Or like all of us, you might have gone through a bad season and you're aware, I got people watching me right now because I fluffed up on a couple of decisions, so I'm building trust. Everything moves at the speed of trust. So the higher the trust, the easier the process becomes. So always value trust. It is the currency of leadership. All right. And then remember, lastly, when you're making change and adjustments, you'll never take everybody with you everywhere. A church that is terrified of losing people really does shrink in the end. Probably one of the greatest attractive things that will make you grow is fearlessness about your vision and where God's leading you. Because people want to follow people who are following God. And that looks courageous, compassionate, kind, and brave. So if you present a vision like that, you can do everything. You will not take everyone with you. Even Jesus didn't. So don't put that false burden on you that you have to take everyone with you. Now, I know it's easier. If you've got a church of 500 and you lose 20, it doesn't feel so bad. But when you've got a church of 40 and you lose 10, it feels huge. Totally understand that. But the only way to follow Jesus is to follow Jesus. So bless you with wisdom, bless you with skills, and learn to lead well. Stuff that begins prophetically, outwork properly can be very exciting if you learn the skills to go with it. Bless you. Well, I hope you enjoyed that and got something from it. I was talking from my book, The Leadership Quest, which you would actually get if you joined Tier 2 or 3 of the Leadership Tribe. And that's what we're talking about all this week, how a team of 10 can join the Global Leadership Tribe, which is the leadership side of our online learning community. And when you join together, it works out incredibly inexpensive, just £25 per leader for a year's investment, 500 modules of teaching, all sorts around theology, prophetic life, the supernatural, revival, growing in God, personally and growing as a leader, how to build church, how to build teams. It's all in there and so much more. And it's growing. That library is growing month on month. And we've got some exciting new stuff coming up too. As well as that, you get private social media groups where you can interact with other members of the tribe around the world, but also with Vicky and myself. There's questions and answers. I love to answer and to wrestle with the stuff that you're wrestling with and see if I can give you some perspective on it. So if joining the tribe as a team, and let's be honest, there's never been a better time for a team to be online learning together how to grow in the things of God, both leadership and the supernatural, and how to drive your church forward into growth together. So if that interests you, stick around. Let me tell you about the tribe. And if you want to come join our family, we'd love to be learning and growing together with you. What is the tribe, I hear you ask? Well, it's a global online learning community. There are loads of us around the world interacting, growing, stretching in the things of God together and having fun as we learn. There's 3 tiers in the tribe. Tier 1 is basic access to our tribe zone. It is an online learning zone. We use the same software as Harvard University, so it's great, it's powerful, it's intuitive, and it works really well on everything from a tablet to a phone to a laptop. And you can grow with us in the things of God over everything from leadership to church growth to faith, things of the Spirit, prophetic, the miraculous. It's all there. 500 modules of audio, video, e-courses and stuff like that. As well as that, you get a private Facebook group where you can interact with Vicky and I, and we can be growing in the things of God together. Tier 2 is all of that, but it's for leaders. It's our global leadership tribe. And so it has a lot more leadership content as well. You get 4 books the moment that you join sent to you, and then you will get every book I write in the period of your membership sent to you free of charge. We want to invest in leaders, and so it's much more interactive at Tier 2. Tier 3 is where 10 leaders in one team can join together so you can learn and grow. It is a brilliant resource to give to all of your team. You don't always want to lose them as they head off to Bible school. You want to train them right where they are in a training community, and that's what this is. So if Tier 3 interests you, have a little look at that. Let me show you some testimonials of what people are saying about their life and learning with the tribe.
Hey there, it's Roma Waterman here from Melbourne, Australia. I just want to say I'm amazed at the amount of resources that are in Tribe and the fresh content that's constantly being added. I say this with complete truthfulness. I think Pastor Jarrod Cooper is one of the best teachers in leadership and the prophetic and creativity that I have heard in the world. So I highly recommend it. I highly recommend that you sign up and be part of such an amazing community.
Hi, my name's Dave Mallender. I'm the pastor of Grace Church Bridlington, and we connected with the Tribe because we knew a lot of the people, and the voices that we heard were encouraging and inspiring. A lot of prophetic voices that helped us and guided us. It helped us to feel like we were part of the global picture and not just our little part of the jigsaw. But above all things, we learned two specific things: practical and spiritual. And the practical things, that we have taken principles from the Tribe and applied them to our church, which means we manage it better, we present it better, we make it look better and sound better. And the practical principles have been brilliant, but there is also the spiritual principles of apostolic anointing. And as we've listened and applied spiritual principles into our church, we've actually seen the church start to grow. And we believe that we're about to hit the second wave of growth from connecting to the Tribe. So we want to say God bless you. Thanks for doing what you're doing, and encourage you to get involved if you can with the Tribe.
Hi, I love the Tribe because it's a place of the prophetic. It's a place of fun, and with a healthy dose of the practical included as well. There's a whole wealth of resources on there that will keep you going for years, and on such a range of subjects that you could do Bible school in your pajamas if you wanted to. And where else could you get an international apostle like Jarrod answering your questions? It's just brilliant. So if you ever feel a bit like Elijah and thinking, oh, poor old me, I'm the only one left who's been zealous for God, then you can just log into the Tribe community and discover, no, actually, God's reserved a whole remnant of people who are there, ready and waiting to encourage each other on and do great things for God's kingdom. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, come over and join us. It would be lovely to meet you.
Isn't that incredible? Head to jarrodcooper.net and come on, join this family of people growing in the things of God, growing in the Word, growing in the Spirit, and enjoying this journey of walking in God together. You don't have to be alone. You don't have to make it up as you go along. Come and join the Tribe, and let's enjoy life together.